He burned his own city, murdered his own family, and watched thousands die for his pleasure. But the question is, was he truly the most evil man in Rome, or just the most misunderstood? Imagine the flames of Rome rising high into the night sky, swallowing temples, homes, and memories in their path. The streets are filled with screams, mothers clutching their children, soldiers helpless against the inferno. And standing far above, in the safety of his palace, an emperor watches. His eyes are cold, unblinking. To some, he is a monster. To others, he is the face of Rome itself. History remembers many tyrants, kings and emperors who ruled with fear, betrayal, and blood. But even among that long list of cruelty, there is one name that refuses to fade. Centuries later, whispers of his madness still echo. Stories of poison, of treachery, of unimaginable acts of violence keep his legend alive. Some believe he destroyed everything Rome stood for. Others argue that he was nothing more than a man trapped in power too great for anyone to bear as so. Who was this ruler that turned Rome's glory into ashes? Who was this emperor whose shadow still haunts history? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you might not only question his place in history, you might also question what true evil really means. Every monster has a beginning. Before the crown, before the fires, before the blood, he was only a boy born into the heart of Rome's most dangerous family. His childhood was not marked by laughter or love, but by whispers of treachery and the ever-present shadow of death. His father's power had made him enemies, and his mother's ambition painted a target on his back before he could even walk. Inside the palace walls, he learned quickly that trust was a luxury. Poisoned cups claimed relatives at feasts. Smiling faces turned to daggers in the dark. Even as a child, he saw betrayal not as an exception, but as the rhythm of life. And his mother, brilliant, ruthless, and unyielding, was his greatest teacher. She told him that power was not given, it was taken, and that mercy was weakness Rome would never forgive. As he grew, so did the paranoia around him. Cousins mysteriously vanished. Tutors who spoke too boldly disappeared without explanation. His world was one where love was conditional, and survival meant hardening your heart before someone tore it apart. What makes a man so cruel? Was it the intoxicating taste of absolute power? Or was it the world that raised him, teaching him from the cradle that cruelty was the only way to survive? Whatever the answer, Rome would soon learn that its greatest empire had also birthed its darkest child. Power in Rome was never simply handed down. It was seized, clawed for, drenched in blood, and purchased with betrayal. And his rise was no different. Behind the marble pillars of the palace, whispers turned into conspiracies, and conspiracies turned into corpses. Relatives who once stood in his way suddenly vanished. Some were poisoned during feasts, others silenced in their sleep. To the outside world, these deaths were accidents. To those close to the throne, they were warnings. The center of this storm was his mother, ruthless, cunning, and determined to see her son crowned at any cost. She cleared his path with manipulation and fear, weaving a web that strangled anyone bold enough to challenge him. And when the time finally came, the empire found itself bowing before a boy who had already witnessed more treachery than most men see in a lifetime. The Senate announced him with grand speeches. The people of Rome cheered, hoping for a golden age. They longed for stability after years of chaos, for a leader who would heal the empire and bring prosperity. To the crowds in the forum, he was young, vibrant, and full of promise, a new dawn for Rome. But beneath the laurel crown, behind the carefully staged smiles, lived something darker. A heart hardened by betrayal, a mind poisoned by suspicion, a ruler who saw enemies everywhere he looked. The empire thought they were crowning a ruler, but they were unleashing a nightmare. The hopes of Rome would soon turn into ashes, and the cheers of the people would be replaced by screams echoing through the Colosseum. The crown did not bring peace, it unlocked something far darker. With power secure in his hands, the young emperor began to reveal the monster Rome had unknowingly crowned. First, it was whispers, rumors of strange behavior inside the palace walls. Nights filled with endless feasts, music echoing through the halls while the empire bled outside. He demanded songs in his honor, plays where he starred as the hero, and temples that bore not the names of gods, but his own. To question him, even with a raised brow, was to invite death. Senators disappeared. Generals who once stood proud were found lifeless. Paranoia consumed him. In his eyes, everyone was plotting against him. But his hunger for blood was only beginning. Then came the night that Rome itself burned. Flames swallowed the city, leaping from wooden rooftops to marble temples, reducing centuries of glory into ash. People screamed as the inferno spread faster than soldiers could contain it. Entire districts were wiped away in hours. And as the city burned, stories spread like wildfire themselves, that their emperor watched from his palace tower, singing and playing music as if it were a performance. Thousands lost everything, their homes, their families, their very lives. And yet, instead of rebuilding for his people, he ordered a colossal palace for himself, built upon the ruins of those who perished. The eternal city cried out for a savior, but found itself at the mercy of a tyrant. No one was safe, not even his own blood. His paranoia extended into his family, poisoning the very ties that once bound him. He accused his wife of betrayal, and in a fit of rage, ended her life with his own hands. His mother, the very woman who had paved his way to the throne, was strangled under his orders when he began to fear her influence. The man Rome once welcomed as their golden youth had become an executioner, cutting down anyone who dared to stand too close. And if his cruelty ended with his family, perhaps Rome could have endured. But the people too became his victims. The Colosseum, once a place of spectacle, turned into a theater of nightmares. Gladiators were forced into hopeless battles, not for honor, but for his amusement. Prisoners were tortured, burned alive, or torn apart by beasts while he laughed from his seat of power. Public executions became entertainment, a stage on which he displayed his absolute control. The blood of Rome stained the sand, and still he demanded more. The empire trembled, but silence was survival. No one dared speak against him. For in Rome under his reign, words could kill. He had turned an empire into his stage, its people into actors in his twisted drama. But beneath the screams and flames, rebellion was quietly brewing. His madness had reached its peak, and the same Rome that once cheered for him now prayed for his end. For years, Rome had suffered in silence. But silence, like fire, eventually consumes itself. The city that once cheered his name now whispered in the shadows, plotting his end. Senators, generals, even members of his inner circle, those who had once bowed before him, secretly gathered to conspire. His madness had crossed the point of no return, and Rome could no longer endure. The rebellion spread like cracks in marble. Provinces rose against him, soldiers defected, and the Senate, the very body that once crowned him, declared him an enemy of the state. The emperor who once commanded absolute obedience now found himself abandoned, stripped of loyalty, stripped of power. And what of his closest allies? One by one, they betrayed him. Friends turned informants. Guards deserted their posts. The palace halls, once filled with endless laughter and feasts, now echoed with silence. The man who had believed himself untouchable now sat alone, haunted by the ghosts of those he had destroyed. In his paranoia, he saw assassins in every shadow, heard plots in every whisper. Yet no dagger was needed. The empire itself had condemned him. He was a ruler without an empire, a man without a friend. History often remembers tyrants as monsters. But in his final days, he was something else entirely. A broken figure, cornered by the very world he had once controlled. The emperor who once commanded the world now found himself hunted by it. His golden palace stood empty, his armies gone, his senate turned against him. Where once there were cheers, now there was silence. Where once there was loyalty, now only betrayal. In his final hours, he fled through hidden passages, disguised and desperate, clinging to life as the empire crumbled around him. Each step was heavy with the weight of paranoia. Every knock at the door sounded like the approach of executioners. He begged for protection, but the guards who once vowed to die for him now refused even to look him in the eye. Last, abandoned and cornered, he was left with one terrible choice. Capture would mean humiliation, torture, and a death too cruel to imagine. And so, he turned the blade on himself. But even then, fate seemed to mock him. His hand trembled, his courage faltered, and he could not finish the act. In the end, it was a loyal servant who delivered the final blow, sparing him from the shame of capture. The emperor who had lived as a god died as a fugitive, afraid, broken, and forgotten by the very Rome he once ruled. Even in death, he tried to escape his fate, but history does not forget. His name, etched in fire and blood, would live on not as a ruler, but as a warning. When word of his death spread across Rome, the city exhaled a breath it had been holding for years. For many, it was a moment of relief. An iron fist had finally loosened its grip. Fires no longer lit the night sky, and the echoes of screams from the arena faded into silence. Rome had rid itself of its nightmare, but freedom came at a price. The empire he left behind was fractured, scarred, and unsteady. Rebellions simmered, trust in leadership was shattered, and the very foundations of Rome trembled under the weight of his sins. In the Senate, speeches were made condemning his memory. Statues bearing his likeness were torn down. His name was struck from monuments, his image erased as though he had never ruled. Rome, desperate to heal, tried to scrub his existence from history, and yet his shadow remained. Mothers still whispered warnings to their children, telling them of the emperor who set the city aflame. His cruelty became legend, his madness a cautionary tale. Rome had rid itself of the man, but not the fear he left behind. Evil men die, but their shadows haunt history forever. His story serves as a reminder of what happens when absolute power falls into the hands of the unworthy. When a man is consumed not by duty, but by his own darkness. Rome moved on. The empire endured, but his ghost lingered in every whisper of tyranny, every warning against unchecked power. And so, we return to the question we began with. Who was he truly? Was he the most evil emperor in Rome's history? Or was he merely a mirror, reflecting the corruption, greed, and bloodlust of the empire that raised him? Think about it. One man alone cannot burn a city, cannot corrupt a senate, cannot turn spectacles into slaughter. It takes a system, a culture, and people willing to look away. Perhaps he was not born a monster. Perhaps Rome made him one. But here is the real question I leave with you. If Rome, the greatest empire of its time, could give birth to such darkness, what about us? Every age has its tyrants, every generation its hidden monsters. If Rome had its Nero, who do we fear today? Is true evil the man who wields power, or the crowd that allows him to? History does not simply belong to the past. It whispers warnings to the present. And the story of Rome's most feared emperor is not just a tale of cruelty long gone. It is a mirror we are still forced to look into. So tell me, was he truly evil, or was he the empire's reflection? The debate begins with you.